How to cut epoxy resin. Summary: epoxy resin is a material that can be used to attach objects together. Method 1. Use a sharp knife. If you need to cut epoxy resin for a small project, using a sharp knife is best. Step 1. Determine where you need to make the cut. Then, use a pencil or pen to mark the spot on the epoxy resin where you want to cut. Step 2. Place the epoxy resin on a cutting board. Next, place the epoxy resin on a cutting board. Step 3. Start cutting the epoxy resin. Start cutting the epoxy resin along the line you marked in Step 1. Step 4. Remove the excess resin. Once you've cut, remove the excess resin from the cutting board. Step 5. Clean up the edges. This will help prevent the resin from chipping or cracking. Method 2. Use a Dremel tool. A Dremel tool is a versatile power tool that can be used for various projects, including cutting epoxy resin. Step 1. Prepare yourself and your work area. Before you begin cutting epoxy resin, it's essential to take the necessary precautions to protect yourself and your work area. Step 2. Set up your Dremel tool. There are two types of cutting discs that can be used with a Dremel tool: cutting wheels and grinding stones. Step 3. Cut the epoxy resin. Using a grinding stone, you can apply more pressure since the abrasive material will quickly cut through the resin. Step 4. Clean up your work area. You can easily cut epoxy resin using a Dremel tool with these simple steps. Method 3. Use a circular saw. You can use either a handheld saw or a table saw, but wear gloves and safety glasses to protect yourself from the blade. Start by measuring the piece of epoxy resin that you need to cut. This will help to protect the surface from the saw blade. If you're using a handheld saw, clamp the piece of epoxy resin to your work surface. If you're using a handheld saw, you may need to use both hands to keep the saw steady. Use a piece of sandpaper to smooth out any rough edges on your cut. Use sandpaper to smooth out the edges of your epoxy resin piece. Start with coarse grit sandpaper and work your way up to a finer grit. This will help to remove any roughness from the cut edge. Epoxy resin can become brittle and break down if exposed to high temperatures or direct sunlight. Another option for disposing of epoxy resin is to donate it to a local recycling center. There are two types of blades that are best for cutting hardened epoxy resin: a diamond-tipped blade and a carbide-tipped blade. Conclusion: you can safely and efficiently cut epoxy resin into the desired shape or size by following these simple steps.